I used to jog every morning before sunrise, not just for health, but because it was the one time of day I felt like I could truly breathe aboard. The city noise began, before texts and calls started rolling in, and before life demanded my attention. It became such a routine part of my life that I never questioned it, never expected anything to go wrong. Until one morning in late October, when I made the mistake of going off my usual trail. I'd been jogging the same neighborhood loop for years around the lake, past the edge of the woods, through the sleepy streets where porch lights flickered on automatic timers. But that morning, something felt different, like my legs had a mind of their own, like I was being pulled toward the trailhead by a magnet I didn't know was there, and instead of circling back after my second mile, I let my curiosity take over and entered the path behind Briar Ridge Park. A winding dirt trail, framed by tall pine trees, that filtered the morning light into eerie beams, and the air grew colder as I went, unnaturally cold. Not in the refreshing way, but in the way that stings your lungs and makes your skin prickly. And I remember checking my phone to see if the temperature had suddenly dropped, but I had no signal, and the screen weirdly glitched. When I tried to refresh the weather app, I brushed it off, thinking maybe the trees were just dense enough to block service, and I kept jogging, focusing on the rhythmic crunch of dirt and dead leaves beneath my shoes, telling myself I'd turn back soon. But 5 minutes in, I noticed something strange. No birds, no squirrels, no sounds at all. Except my breathing. Then I saw something ahead of me that looked like a person standing off the side of the trail, partially hidden behind a tree, not moving, not reacting to the sound of my steps approaching, just watching. I slowed, heartbeat already climbing up my throat, squinting through the low light to see who or what it was, and I tried to call out, "Hey, you okay?" But as soon as I spoke, the figure stepped further into the shadows behind the tree, disappearing like it had just melted into the woods. And I felt this cold pulse of dread slam through my chest, like I'd just narrowly avoided something wrong. But I didn't turn back like any sane person should have. I just kept jogging, partly because I didn't want to look scared, and partly because I was starting to feel this irrational idea that I was being watched and didn't want to show weakness, even though no one else was supposed to be out there. Maybe 10 minutes later, the path started to get steeper and thinner, narrowing between trees that bent toward each other like they were whispering. And that's when the smell hit Matt's heart. Metallic, earthy, like rust and wet meat. And I stopped, dead in my tracks, nauseated, because it was so strong. And as I looked around to find the source, I saw a black trash bag tucked behind a fallen log, half covered in dead leaves, bloated and tied at the top, something leaking from the bottom in thick, dark smears. And I didn't want to know what was in it, but also couldn't make myself walk away without checking. So I reached over with a stick, nudged the bag, and instantly gagged when it shifted and revealed a clump of matted hair and what looked like part of a human foot sticking out. Like a child's end, I fell backward, scrambling away, eyes wide, breathing ragged, and before I could even process what I'd just seen, I heard that same rhythmic crunch of footsteps, somewhere behind me, slow and heavy, not running, just walking. And I swear it sounded like whoever it was knew I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I didn't wait to see them, I just ran, full speed, panic giving me a burst of energy I didn't know I had. Not even caring which direction I was going anymore, just trying to get out. But no matter how far I ran, the trail kept twisting and turning back on itself, and I passed the same broken tree stump 3 times, meaning I was running in a loop, like the forest itself was messing with me. I tried to call 911, but my phone still had no signal, and the battery dropped from 68% to 2% in seconds before shutting off completely. And I wanted to scream, but knew that screaming might just help whatever was stalking me to find me faster. So I ducked behind a thick tree trunk, crouching, hands shaking, trying to control my breath while straining to listen. And I swear to you, I heard it again, footsteps, this time slower, more deliberate, like whoever it was toying with me. Making sure I knew I wasn't alone, then came the whistling, soft, tuneless, broken, like someone trying to mimic a song they'd heard once, but couldn't remember the melody, and it was close to the end. I peeked out from the tree, but nothing was there. Just shadows that seemed to flicker and stretch as the sun rose further behind the trees. I waited until it was quiet again and made a break for it, cutting through the trees instead of following the trail, branches slashing at my face and arms, tearing my sleeves. But eventually I burst out near the playground behind the park and collapsed on the gravel in full view of the parking lot, gasping for breath, filthy and bleeding and sobbing because I was alive. I went straight to the police, told them everything Evan about the bag, and they found it, but it was empty. No body parts, no blood, just damp leaves and a single child's shoe inside. And the officers exchanged that look, one that says we don't believe you without using words, and they told me maybe I imagined it. Maybe I'd had a panic attack, maybe the smell was from a dead animal, and the bag had just been garbage up. I know what I saw, and ever since that day, things haven't been the same. My phone sometimes rings in the middle of the night, with no number displayed, just heavy breathing on the line, and when I go for walks near my apartment, I occasionally catch a glimpse of someone watching me from a distance, tall, motionless, and gone the second I try to focus on them. And last night, I swear this is true, I came home from work and found muddy footprints on the carpet leading from the front door to my bedroom window. Only the door was still locked, and the window was cracked open, like someone had been there and was still there, waiting for me to come back to the trail. I didn't sleep that night, not after seeing those footprints, and every creak in the apartment felt like a warning, like I wasn't alone, like whoever or whatever had followed me from that trail hadn't left, but was hiding in the corners of my life, waiting for the right moment to show itself again. And even though I wanted to forget the whole thing, to convince myself it was a hallucination, a dream twisted by stress and lack of sleep, I couldn't shake the memory of the smell, that whistle, and the empty bag that should have never been empty. And the next morning, bleary and jittery from zero rest, I swore to myself I wouldn't go jogging again. But habit is a funny thing, and fear is even stranger, because 2 days later I found myself lacing up my sneakers again before dawn, telling myself I'd stay on the regular loop, just around the lake, nice and open. No trails, no woods, just a peaceful jog to shake the nerves out. But I swear the moment I stepped outside, I felt it again, that weird magnetic pull, like something was waiting for me to acknowledge it, calling to me from the shadows where logic doesn't work and instincts whisper louder than reason. And instead of turning left toward the lake, my feet took me right, back toward the trail behind Briar Ridge, and I fought it. I really did. Stopped at the edge, stared down that dirt path as the wind rustled the leaves and made the trees sway like they were sighing in relief at my return, and something in my chest begged me to turn around, to run the other way, but I didn't listen. I couldn't, and I stepped in again, heart hammering as my shoes hit the ground like war drums. This time, I didn't. Rooney walked, slow and cautious, scanning the trees, listening for any signs of movement, and the first mile or so was uneventful, almost boring, and I almost convinced myself that I had made everything up, that it had all just been my mind playing tricks on Muntao. I reached the exact spot where I'd found the trash bag days earlier, and there it was again, only this time the bag was torn open, like it had been ripped from the inside out, and lying next to it was something far worse, a photo, half buried in the dirt, damp and muddy, but unmistakably mine, taken from inside my apartment, showing me asleep in bed, with my back to the camera. And I swear I stopped breathing for a moment, just froze, the world spinning as I picked it up with trembling fingers and turned it over. On the back, written in tiny black letters, were the words, "You left too soon." And suddenly the whistling started again, low and deliberate, and this time it was coming from both sides of the trail, like there was more than one person or thing doing it, and I couldn't tell which direction was safe. if any. So I did the only thing I could do. I ran, again, ducking off the trail, into the woods. Not caring how much noise I made, or how reckless it was, just needing to escape that sound that felt like it was threading its way into my brain. And the deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The trees looked stretched and wrong, like someone had taken normal forest images and distorted them in Photoshop. Bending trunks in impossible curves, leaves that shimmered like wet skin, and I swear the ground was pulsing beneath my feet like a living thing. And then I heard Ita scream, high-pitched and agonizing, like it came from inside my own skull. And I stopped, spinning around, convinced someone was hurt. But the woods were empty, at least visually. I could feel it. The presence, the watcher, something with eyes that weren't eyes and a mind that didn't think like we do. The screaming faded and turned into sobbing, then laughter, then silence again. And through the trees, I saw a cabin or something, like it squat and crooked, its wood rotted, and its roof sunken. And I don't know why, but I approached, drawn to it like a moth to a flame, even though my body screamed to turn around. And as I stepped onto the creaking porch, the door opened by itself, slowly, as if inviting me in. And inside was pitch black, colder than outside. And yet, I stepped through that doorway like I didn't have a choice. And the door slammed shut behind me. I reached for my phone, but the screen stayed black, no matter how many times I pressed the button. And in the dark, something moved, shuffling, breathing. Too many feet on too many surfaces of sand. Then the room lit up, not with light, but with photographs, dozens of them hanging from strings above my head. All of them of me, some jogging, some sleeping, some brushing my teeth, sitting on the toilet, even standing in the shower. And I screamed, genuinely screamed for the first time in years. And that's when I heard my own voice whisper, "You belong here now." Only it wasn't coming from me, it was coming from the darkness behind me. And when I turned, I saw a mirror, tall and cracked, and my reflection wasn't right. It smiled when I didn't, moved its head at a different rhythm, and then it lifted its hand while mine stayed still. And the reflection opened its mouth and whistled that same broken tune. And I backed away slowly, shaking, muttering no over and over again, until I tripped over something soft on the floor and looked down to see another person, barely alive, curled into themselves, whispering nonsense, rocking back and forth. And when they looked up at me, their eyes were gone, just empty sockets oozing black fluid, and they said, "It watches through the trees," before collapsing. And I ran harder than I ever have in my life, bursting out of the cabin into blinding morning light that hadn't been there a second ago. The cabin gone behind me. No sign of where I'd been, and I somehow stumbled back into the edge of Briar Ridge Park, shaking, drenched in sweat, covered in scratches and dirt. And when I went home, there were more photos waiting, nailed to my front door, inside my mailbox, under my pillow wand. I moved 2 days later, left the city, changed my number, tried to disappear, but it didn't help. Beckos. Last week, I woke up to find muddy footprints on my new carpet again. And this morning, when I looked out the window, there was a figure standing across the street under the tree lintel, head tilted, watching, gunned. Though I blinked, turned away, and looked again to find nothing there. I know it was real, because now the whistling is inside my head, playing every time I'm alone, every time it gets quiet, every time I start to feel safe again. And I know now I'll never outrun it, not because I'm slow, but because it lives inside the space between my heartbeats, in the dark gaps of memory, in the breath I take before I scream. And the worst part, I think I invited it in the first time I stepped off the trail. If this story chilled you to the bone, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, even the ones that whisper. And if you're brave enough to hear more terrifying true tales, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because the next story might just be watching you already.